My name is Walter Hayes. I'm 61 years old, a retired steel worker who spent most of his life on the factory floor, where the air always smelled of hot metal and grease. My back is crooked now, my hands stiff from years of lifting more than I should have. But I still wake at dawn, make black coffee, and walk the perimeter of my little patch of land outside Glendale, Arizona. That patch isn't much, 20 acres of dusty soil, half-collapsed fencing, and weeds tall enough to hide a coyote. Folks in town call it Hayes Hollow, though nothing's ever grown here but mesquite and regrets. My late wife, Sharon, once dreamed we'd turn it into a small farm, maybe raise chickens and sell vegetables at the Saturday market. But life, bills, and my factory hours swallowed those dreams. After Sharon passed, I kept the land anyway. Not because it was valuable, but because it was ours. My younger brother Charles never understood that. He's the polished one, button-down shirts, leased BMWs, always talking about opportunities. He left the steel town behind, started dabbling in real estate schemes, and never stopped reminding me how small my world was. At family gatherings, he'd pat my shoulder like I was the slow kid in class. Still hanging on to that dirt patch, Walt? He'd chuckle. You know what they say? Land without yield is just a sandbox. I'd smile tight, let it pass. Family is family, even when it cuts deep. But last Thanksgiving, Charles showed up all charm. He slapped my back, poured me a drink, and said he had a favor to ask. Something about leveraging Hayes Hollow for a short-term investment. He called it a win-win. I didn't know then that his idea of win-win meant him pocketing nearly $500,000 while leaving me on the hook. That night, as I stood in the cold desert air staring at my worthless field, I had no idea this land, this so-called sandbox, was about to become the battleground of my life. It was the Friday after Thanksgiving when Charles made his move. The family gathered at my sister's house for leftovers, kids running circles around the table, football humming low on the TV. I was in the corner chair with a paper plate of turkey and stuffing when Charles clinked his glass. "Everybody, I want to toast to opportunity," he said, flashing that salesman grin, "because if you're not making your money work for you, you're just standing still." A few chuckles, a few rolled eyes. He looked right at me. "Like my brother Walt here," he continued, voice dripping with false affection. "Still nursing that patch of dirt outside town. What's it been? 30 years. Nothing but weeds and dust. You could have been sitting on a gold mine if you knew what to do with it." The room went quiet. My fork hovered mid-air. "Charles," I started. He cut me off with a laugh. "Don't take it personal, Walt. You've worked hard, sure, but let's be honest. You don't understand leverage. You cling to that land like it's sacred, but land is just collateral if you're smart." His son, Darren, 25, hair slicked back, smirked from across the table. "Uncle Walt, imagine that empty field finally pulling its weight instead of being a retirement joke." Laughter rippled, and heat rose in my chest. My niece tried to change the subject, but Charles kept pressing. "I've got a deal lined up," he said, lowering his voice like he was letting me in on a secret. "Low risk, high return, but I need collateral to secure the loan. Only temporary. I've got buyers lined up, contracts waiting. Walt, if you let me use that land as backing, we're talking a $450,000 investment turned into 7 figures by next fall. I'll cut you in, of course." All eyes swung to me. I chewed slowly, swallowed the lump in my throat. "That land isn't for sale," I said. Charles leaned closer, his smile tightening. "Not selling, brother. Just letting it work for you for once. Don't you want to stop being the guy everyone pities? The words landed like a slap. My plate suddenly felt heavy. I forced a thin smile, pushing back my chair. We'll talk later, Charles. But as I left the table, I caught Darren whispering to his father. They both laughed, quiet but sharp. And I knew then, this wasn't just family talk. This was the opening shot of something bigger, something they thought I was too slow to see coming. The first letter came 2 weeks later, a thick envelope from Desert West Bank with my name on it. I slid it open with a pocket knife at the kitchen table, expecting another generic offer for credit cards. Instead, bold print jumped off the page. Notice of loan agreement, $450,000. My stomach clenched. Beneath it was a payment schedule, monthly installments bigger than what I'd made in a year at the steel mill. At the bottom sat a signature, my signature, scribbled in ink. But I hadn't signed a damn thing. I drove straight to Charles's place. His house sat at the edge of a gated community, polished cars in the driveway. Christmas lights already strung across the eaves. He opened the door in a golf shirt, glass of wine in hand, and smiled like nothing was wrong. "Walt, what a surprise! Come in, come in." I didn't step inside. I held up the letter. "What the hell is this?" His smile faltered for half a second, then returned, slicker than before. "Ah, that. Just the paperwork we talked about, brother. Don't look so rattled. It's all under control." "I never signed this," I snapped. Charles's eyes narrowed. "You must have forgotten. We went over it Thanksgiving weekend, remember? Darren was there too. You gave us your blessing." "I gave you nothing but a no," he chuckled, low and condescending. "Look, Walt, the bank doesn't release nearly $500,000 without proper signatures. If your name's on it, then it's done. Simple as that." My fists clenched at my sides. "You forged me." Darren appeared from the hallway, phone in hand, smirking. "Careful, Uncle. Accusing family of crimes isn't a good look. Maybe you're just confused." I stepped forward, jaw tight. "You listen to me. That land isn't yours to play with. You've crossed a line." Charles set his glass down, his tone icy now. "Lines are for men who can afford to draw them. You want to fight this? Go ahead. But all you'll prove is that you're an old fool dragging his family through the mud." For a moment, silence stretched between us, thick as steel. I finally turned and walked back to my truck, pulse hammering. But as I slid behind the wheel, I knew this wasn't just a dispute anymore. This was war. And Charles had just made his first fatal mistake. The following week, I went down to Desert West Bank myself. The lobby smelled of lemon polish and cold air conditioning. A young loan officer ushered me into a glass-walled office, eyes polite but guarded. "Mr. Hayes, according to our records, you co-signed a $450,000 loan with Mr. Charles Hayes. The funds were dispersed 3 weeks ago." "Dispersed where?" I demanded. She tapped a few keys, then turned the screen toward me. A series of transfers, tens of thousands at a time, flowed into accounts under Charles's name, then out again toward purchases. Luxury car dealership, a private jet charter, a wire to Las Vegas. My jaw tightened. "And you never thought to confirm this with me directly?" "Sir, the paperwork appeared valid. We had notarization and identification on file." I pushed the papers back across the desk, my hands shaking with rage. That evening, I drove past Charles's place. A brand new Mercedes sat in the driveway. Darren lounged on the hood, snapping selfies with a gold watch gleaming on his wrist. The glow of their Christmas lights mocked me. My land, my worthless patch of weeds, was the key they'd used to bankroll their fantasy. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the soil-stained boots by the door, the ones that had carried me through 35 years of factory shifts. Everything I'd built, every penny saved, every blister on my palms, it was all being laughed at by my own brother. The next morning, I stopped at the old diner on Main Street. Sitting at the counter was Hank Doyle, a fellow steelworker I hadn't seen in years. He'd aged the same way I had, lined face, broad shoulders bent, but unbroken. "Walt Hayes," he said, slapping my back. "Heard your brother's been flashing money around. Didn't know you two were in business together." I told him everything, quietly, between sips of burnt coffee. Hank listened, shaking his head. "Charles always was slick," he muttered. "But forgery? That's blood-deep betrayal." "Listen, I've got a cousin works in county records. She's seen plenty of bad paper. If you want another set of eyes, I can ask her to dig." For the first time since this started, I felt a spark. I wasn't alone. "Do it," I said, "because Charles thinks he's buried me. I plan to show him just how wrong he is." The notice came on a cold December morning. A bright orange envelope taped to my mailbox with the words, "Foreclosure Warning." My throat tightened as I tore it open. Inside was the blunt language of bureaucracy. Failure to make payments would trigger repossession of Hayes's Hollow within 90 days. My land, worthless to everyone but me, was now the collateral the bank would seize to cover Charles's debt. I stood in the yard staring at the brittle weeds, the rusted fence posts, the cracked earth that had carried Sharon's footprints once. The world blurred. That night I couldn't cook. I ate cold beans straight from the can, hunched at the kitchen table while the wind howled against the windows. The power bill sat unpaid, and the lamps flickered like they might die any second. On the mantel, the photo of Sharon caught my eye again. Her smile, sunlit and stubborn, staring back from that county fair portrait. I whispered, "I'm sorry," to an empty room. The phone rang and rang. Creditors, no doubt. But I let it buzz until the machine picked up. I couldn't bear to hear one more stranger's voice reminding me of what I was about to lose. By midnight, I sat on the porch in my old recliner, wrapped in a quilt that smelled of dust. Coyotes yipped in the distance. My boots felt too heavy, my hands too weak. For the first time since I was a boy, I felt like I was being swallowed by silence. Charles had money, charm, and signatures on his side. I had nothing but a barren patch of land and a pile of letters with threats stamped in bold. The shame cut deep. In town, whispers had started. Walt let his slick brother rope him in. Poor old fool signed away his land. Every word carried like an ember across dry grass. I clenched the quilt tighter. I'd faced molten steel, layoffs, the death of my wife. But this, betrayal from blood, the theft of the only thing I still called mine, this felt like the end of me. And yet somewhere beneath that despair, a spark still smoldered. Faint, almost gone, but not dead. I might have stayed in that fog if Hank hadn't shown up the next morning. His old pickup rattled into my driveway, exhaust puffing white against the cold. He climbed out with 2 coffees and a look that said he wasn't leaving without answers. "Walt, you look like hell," he said, handing me the cup. "Heard the bank tagged you. That true?" I nodded, too tired to lie. "They'll take Hayes's Hollow inside 3 months." Hank shook his head. "Not if we make some noise first." He slid into the kitchen chair, pulling out a folded stack of papers. "I talked to my cousin over at County Records. Guess what? The notarization on your loan papers was done by the same guy flagged last year for falsifying titles. Name's Harold Klein. Ring any bells?" I stared at the name, my pulse quickening. That's the same notary Charles used for the land transfer. Exactly. Hank leaned in. And Klein's under quiet investigation already. If we can tie Charles to him, we've got a pattern. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy. Enough to blow this wide open. I rubbed my temples, the first rush of adrenaline in weeks cutting through the despair. But the bank's already moving. Paperwork's on their side. Paperwork only wins until evidence proves otherwise, Hank said firmly. You've got to fight like you did on the floor of that mill, step by step, steady heat. You're tougher than Charles ever was. You just forgot. His words hit me hard. He was right. I'd let shame make me small, let Charles's lies define me. But I wasn't senile, wasn't beaten. I was Walter Hayes, son of a steelman, husband of Sharon, a man who'd sweated and bled for every inch of ground I stood on. I looked up, fire kindling in my chest. All right, we dig, we document, we trap him. Hank grinned, the same way he had when we pulled double shifts years ago. That's the Walt I know, and I'll be damned if we let that slick snake walk off with your land. The clock ticked on the wall, steady as a hammer. For the first time in months, I wasn't dreading its rhythm. I was matching it. Charles thought I'd roll over, but he was about to learn what steel feels like when it refuses to bend. That night, Hank and I spread papers across my kitchen table like we were prepping for a shift change at the mill. Only this time the stakes weren't production quotas. They were my name, my land, and my future. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and started writing. Block letters steady as I could manage. Step 1. Gather every piece of paper with my so-called signature. Bank, county, loan office. Compare against records from the factory, my mortgage, even Sharon's will. Step 2. Tie Harold Klein to Charles. If Klein's under investigation, there'd be whispers, maybe even complaints buried in county logs. Step 3. Catch Charles running his mouth. A man like him couldn't resist bragging, especially after a drink. If we had his voice, we had him. Step 4. Line up witnesses, people who'd known my handwriting for decades, old supervisors, neighbors, the feed store clerk who saw me sign receipts every month. Hank leaned back, chewing the end of a toothpick. You forgot step 5. What's that? He grinned. Keep your damn cool. If Charles smells you coming, he'll cover his tracks. I sighed, but he was right. Every instinct told me to storm into Charles's shiny house and tear the truth out of him. But war wasn't won on impulse. It was won by patience, proof, and timing. Hank slid a small device across the table. A pocket recorder, no bigger than a lighter. Borrowed this from my nephew. Press red and it'll catch everything. Slip it in your pocket the next time you're near Charles. Odds are he'll hand you the rope to hang him with. I turned the recorder in my palm, the red button winking under the lamp. It felt heavier than it should, like holding a weapon. All right, I said, my voice low. We don't just fight back, we make an example. Hank's grin faded into steel. Exactly. And when this cracks, Walt, it won't just be about your land. It'll be Charles's reputation, his money, his freedom. The room went quiet, except for the ticking clock. I looked at the recorder, then at Sharon's photo on the mantel. Charles thought he'd buried me under paper and shame, but I was about to dig him out with something sharper. The trap was ready. All I needed was bait. 2 mornings later, I walked back into Desert West Bank with my jaw set like iron. Miss Carter, the branch manager, greeted me with a wary smile. She'd known me since Sharon was alive, since I'd opened my first savings account for Laura's college fund. Walter, she said gently, I told you before, the paperwork looks legitimate. Then let me see it again, I said, firmer this time, every page, every signature. She hesitated, then disappeared into the back. When she returned, she carried a manila folder thicker than a Bible. She slid it across the counter. I flipped through until I found the loan agreement. My name sprawled across the bottom of 3 pages, but the loop of the W in Walter was wrong. Too shallow, too smooth, and the Y in Hayes ended in a clean tail. Mine always hooked back up, a habit from decades of signing pay stubs at the mill. I set the papers side by side with an old copy of my mortgage deed, which I'd pulled from my truck. The differences screamed from the page. Miss Carter leaned over, frowning. "That doesn't look like your hand." "Because it's not." I tapped the notary line. Sure enough, there it was again. Harold Klein. Same stamp, same signature. Miss Carter sighed. "Walter, if you want, I can certify these as true copies and note that the signatures appear inconsistent with prior records. But once I do that, this goes beyond the bank. It becomes evidence." "Do it," I said without hesitation. An hour later, I walked out with a stamped certification in my hand. Physical proof #1. A weapon I could put on any judge's desk. That night, Hank came over. I spread the documents across the kitchen table, lamplight pooling over the forged lines. He let out a low whistle. "Charles is sloppy," he muttered. "Men like him think they're untouchable. That arrogance is our ticket." I pulled the recorder from my pocket, the red light blinking when I clicked it on. The paper shows the forgery. Now all we need is his voice bragging about it. Hank leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Then let's make sure he talks." Sunday dinner at my sister's house was supposed to be a calm affair. Pot roast, football on low, the usual chatter. But I hadn't come for roast. I came with a manila folder under my arm and fire in my gut. Charles was already there, wine glass in hand, holding court about some upcoming venture. Darren chuckled beside him, chiming in like a well-trained echo. Laura sat quietly, twisting her napkin. She hadn't looked me in the eye since Thanksgiving. I waited until plates hit the table before I laid the folder down with a heavy slap. "Got something to share," I said, my voice cutting through the clatter of silverware. Charles smirked. "Another story about your land, brother?" "No," I said, sliding the certified bank copies across the table. "This is about forgery, about theft, about my name being used to steal $450,000. The room froze. My sister's fork clinked against her plate. Charles reached for the papers too quickly. He flipped them open, his jaw tight. Darren leaned in, color draining from his face. I pointed to the notary line. Harold Klein, the same man tied to shady filings before. The same name stamped on my supposed signature. Laura whispered, barely audible. "Dad, is that true?" Charles forced a laugh, but it came out brittle. "Oh, come on. This is business. Walt knew what he was agreeing to. He just doesn't remember." I leaned forward, eyes locked on him. "I've signed my name the same way for 40 years. That loop, that hook, you couldn't fake it if you tried. And you didn't. You just rushed it." Darren muttered, "Uncle, you don't want to do this." Laura stood suddenly, chair scraping the floor. She grabbed the papers, eyes scanning. Her hands shook. "This isn't Dad's writing. I've seen his signature 1,000 times." Her voice cracked. "Charles, what did you do?" For the first time, his mask slipped. He slammed his wineglass down, red spilling across the tablecloth. "Enough. Family should stick together, not drag each other through the mud." I held his gaze, steady. Family doesn't steal blood and call it business. The silence was suffocating. Then Laura dropped the papers like they burned her. "I can't believe this," she whispered. Charles turned toward me, his smile gone, eyes like knives. "You're making a mistake, Walt." I stood, slipping the recorder deeper into my pocket. "No, Charles. The mistake was yours, and I'm not done yet." 2 days after that dinner, I found a plain envelope tucked under my front door. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, block letters carved deep into the page. "Back off or you'll lose more than land." I held it in my hands until the edges crumpled. My gut told me exactly who wrote it. Charles had moved past smug smiles. Now he was threatening me outright. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from Darren, his tone low and mocking. "Uncle Walt, you're pushing too hard. People who push too hard get crushed. Think about it." I saved both, the note and the voicemail. More rope for them to hang themselves with. But anger alone wasn't enough. I needed a legal shield. That's when Hank introduced me to Kelly Myers, a young lawyer just starting her practice in town. Her family had farmed here for 3 generations, so she understood what land meant. Kelly sat across from me in her modest office, papers spread across the desk. "Mr. Hayes, this isn't just civil. Forgery, fraud, intimidation. It's criminal. If you'll let me, I'll represent you. Pro bono until we get traction." Her voice carried a confidence that steadied me. I slid the certified bank forms toward her. She studied them, then nodded sharply. "This is strong. And that notary, Klein, he's already on the county's radar. If we can tie Charles to him, this case blows wide open." Hank leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Told you, Walt. You're not in this foxhole alone." For the first time, I believed it. That night, I sat on the porch with the threatening note in one hand and the recorder in the other. Coyotes yipped in the distance, but my focus was razor sharp. Every threat Charles sent, every slip of arrogance, was fuel for the fire. He thought fear would shut me down. Instead, it hardened me. I wasn't just fighting to keep a worthless patch of land anymore. I was fighting to prove I couldn't be erased. And Charles had no idea just how close he was to losing everything. It was Hank who called me on a Saturday night, excitement sharp in his voice. "Walt, get down to O'Malley's. You're going to want to hear this." The bar was crowded, neon signs buzzing over the jukebox. Hank was tucked in a corner booth with his nephew, a bartender who knew how to keep his ears open. He slid a phone across the table, volume turned up. The recording was scratchy, but the voice was clear. "Charles. Man, it was easy," he bragged between gulps of bourbon. "Walt's too slow to notice. I've got his signature down close enough. And with Klein stamping it, the bank doesn't blink. 450 grand. Just like that." His buddies laughed, clinking glasses. Charles leaned closer to the mic without knowing it. "That patch of dirt was never worth a dime, but it got me everything I needed. By the time the old fool figures it out, Darren and I will have doubled it. And if he squeals, please, who's going to believe him over me?" The laughter swelled again. My chest burned as I listened, but not with shame, with clarity. This wasn't just family betrayal, it was a confession. Hank's nephew grinned. "Crystal clear, huh? Got the whole thing. Video too if you need it." I clenched the phone in my hand, the weight of it heavier than steel. Physical proof #2. His own arrogance gift-wrapped. The next morning, I sat across from Kelly in her office. She replayed the audio twice, her expression hardening each time. "This is it," she said firmly. "The bank documents show the forgery. This recording proves intent. Fraud, conspiracy, forgery. You've got him cornered. Once we file, it won't just be civil. It'll be criminal." I leaned back, exhaling for the first time in weeks. "So he can't weasel out?" She shook her head. Not when he's bragging about stealing $500,000 on tape. For the first time since Sharon's funeral, I felt my shoulders lighten. The tide had turned. Charles thought he was untouchable. But now, with his own words in my pocket, I was ready to drag him into the light where the whole county could see who he really was. The county courthouse was packed the morning of the hearing. Reporters clustered on the steps, sniffing a story about small-town fraud tied to big-city loans. I walked in with Hank at my side and Kelly carrying a binder thick enough to choke a horse. Charles strutted in wearing a new suit, Darren trailing behind. His smirk flickered when he saw the crowd, but he kept his chin high. He still thought charm could outshine the truth. The judge called us to order, her gavel cracking sharp. Kelly rose first, calm but fierce. She laid the certified bank forms on the bench. "Forgery," she said. "Notice the inconsistencies. Compare with Mr. Hayes's verified signature from a 30-year mortgage." The judge leaned forward, nodding slowly. Next came the notary stamp. Harold Klein again. Kelly's voice sharpened. "This same notary is under active investigation for fraudulent filings. Mr. Charles Hayes chose him deliberately." Charles shifted in his chair, but Kelly wasn't finished. She cued the audio. The courtroom went dead quiet as Charles's own voice filled the air. "Walt's too slow to notice. I've got his signature down close enough. 450 grand. Just like that." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Laura, sitting behind me, covered her face with her hands. Darren paled, shrinking in his seat. The judge banged her gavel once. "That recording is clear as day." Kelly closed the binder with a snap. "Forgery, fraud, conspiracy, intimidation. This wasn't business, Your Honor. This was a calculated theft from a man who trusted his own brother." Charles's lawyer sputtered about misunderstandings and family disputes, but it was like tossing pebbles at a freight train. The judge leaned back, her voice cold. "This court rules in favor of Walter Hayes. The $450,000 loan is void as fraudulent. Hayes's hollow is returned in full. Furthermore, this matter will be referred to the district attorney for criminal prosecution." The gavel cracked again. Charles shot to his feet, shouting, "This is garbage! He's lying! He's—" Deputies grabbed him before he could finish. Darren slumped, staring at the floor. I stood slowly, steady as steel. "You underestimated me, Charles. That was your last mistake." The deputies hauled him away as reporters swarmed. But I didn't linger. I walked out into the desert sun with Hank and Kelly. The weight finally lifted. Hayes's hollow was mine again. Not because it was worth millions, but because it was proof no one could erase me. A month after the hearing, Hayes's hollow was quiet again. The mesquite swayed in the wind, and the soil smelled like rain for the first time in years. I patched the old fence myself, slow but steady, the way Sharon would have liked it. Laura came by one Sunday with her kids. She hugged me tight, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad. I should have believed you sooner." I told her the truth, that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's choosing not to carry someone else's poison. Charles faced criminal charges. Darren skipped town. But I didn't need their downfall to feel whole. My victory wasn't just land or money. It was dignity. I'd proven that even when family tries to write you off, you can still write your own ending. If you've listened this far, thank you. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Stories Men U60 USA, because stories like mine deserve to be heard.